Salvete discipuli. We're getting started with the next 10 lines of Daedalus and Icarus. We're going to go from lines 210 to about halfway through line 220. So again, if you have missed the other videos, you want to at least go back and watch those, get the rest of the story. You can always go back and do the assignments later. But let's get started with lines 210 to 220. As a reminder, we're always thinking about our themes, and we're getting at the point in the text where we can really start discussing these in more detail, and we will do so. But let's think about what happens when humans do things that are beyond human abilities. What is supposed to be the appropriate relationship between father and son, and how do human flaws contribute to their downfalls? We're going to go ahead and dive right into the text here. So I just want to remind you where we last left off. Daedalus had finished constructing his wings, and he had tested them, had been able to hover with them, and then he was giving Icarus instructions, telling don't fly too high, otherwise you are going to scorch the feathers, they start to fall apart, that will be bad. Don't fly too low because the spray from the ocean will get them wet, weigh them down, and that's not good, you won't be able to fly. So he says take the middle route, follow me, and all sorts of things like that. So now we're wrapping up his discussion there. He finished speaking, and we're going to get to the beginning of their flight. So we start here with the prep phrase inter opus manitusque, right? So in between the work, the opus, right? So the work of constructing the wings and attaching them, and the warnings, monitusque. So monitus here is a fourth declension noun. So this is actually the accusative plural. I will link you guys a video on the fourth declension endings in case you are curious. They're not super common. It's more just, be aware that they exist, and be aware that this is a fourth declension noun. Go take a look at it. You'll see it's a lot of us. Anyway, so in between the work and the warnings, then we have the genai. Here, this is the cheeks. These are the cheeks on your face, not other cheeks. Of the old man. So senilis here is an adjective, so we can just say the old man's cheeks. Maduere, grew wet. Maduere is an interesting form here. Take a look at our note down here. It's actually a shortened form of the third plural perfect active indicative maduerunt. And your clue that you have this instead of an infinitive is the U, right? Because you don't have a U on the stem for a present active infinitive. So this is actually our clue that we're using the third stem, right? Madui would be the third principal part of this verb, mado, madere, madui, to grow wet. And so we can do this, right, because it's poetry, and this is a technique that the poets call syncopation, comes from the Greek to shorten. And so we take basically the UNT ending, which in scansion would have been long, right? This U would have been long because it's followed by two consonants, and replace it with a short E. And you can see here that that would be a short E, so that we have our dactyl there at the end. So that is one of the reasons why you would use a syncopation. It's also just a very common form. They liked the way maduere sounded better than maduerunt. So you'll also see this next year in Latin 3 when you read Cicero's in Catilinum, his first Catilinarian speech, where he says abutere instead of abuteres. So it was often common to syncopate verbs, even in speeches, not just in poetry. So that is what we've got going on here, and we'll actually see another syncopation here in the second line with tremuere. Okay, so in between the work and the warnings, the old man's cheeks grew wet, right, perfect tense, and the manus, the hands of the father, his fatherly hands, right? So patria here, adjective form of pater. So the father's hands tremuerade, trembled. To English words like tremor from that. So Daedalus is nervous, right? He's crying, his hands are trembling. That's not good. Then, very tragic moment here, we have he gave kisses to his natto, to his son. And then we've got a perfect or sorry, not a perfect, a future passive participle, modifying oscula here. And this is purely the future passive participle, to be blanked, right? Something that will happen in the future. So not to be repeated, and then we get the adverb iterum again. So this is the last time that Daedalus is going to kiss his son. So he gave kisses to his son, not to be repeated again. And, right, oh, and by the way, suo goes with nato. That's dative because, we've got dated. We want an indirect object. And here on the penny squay, having been lifted, here's a perfect passive participle coming from the fourth principal part of a verb. That's how you know, based on its form, that it looks like a fourth principal part of a verb if we looked up this verb. Having been lifted by the feathers, there's our ablative means. He flies ante, before or in front. So again, that's being used adverbally and almost kind of prepositionally, except we don't have in front of whom he's in front of, but we assume in front of Icarus. So he flies in front. So we've switched to present tense, of course, to make it a little bit more vivid. So he flies in front, and he timets, he fears for his companion. And of course, his companion is Icarus. So that's half the line there. Right, we got a long section to get through, so it's going to take us a bit. So that's what we've got so far. So take a moment, pause, go back if you need to take some notes, jot some things down. But we have this very inauspicious beginning here for this flight. Daedalus is clearly nervous, and we can guess why based on how Icarus has behaved up to this point and how much he had to stress, fly this way, don't fly that way. All right, so he continues and he starts with a simile. Velutir means just like, and similes are the same in Latin as they are in English. It's a comparison introduced by the words like or as. So we just need to know what the Latin words for like or as are, and that's velut, ut, quasi, ita sometimes, similis, all of those things will introduce a simile. So just like an ale, a bird, right? And this is a large bird, right? So this is a synonym for always. Just like a bird, and then we've got the relative clause here, which from an alto nido, from a high nest, has produxit, has led forth its teneram prolem, its tender offspring, its young offspring, in aera, into the air. Right, so this is a bird teaching its babies how to fly. Maybe less Chevy and more gentle, sounds like. Right, so we're comparing Daedalus to this mother bird and Icarus to the baby bird, right? And what else does this bird do? It leads forth and encourages him to follow and teaches him the destructive arts or the damnable arts. So that is what Daedalus is doing here. Is he starts flying and he says, "Icarus, follow after me." And he himself moves both his own wings, moves his own wings and looks back at the wings of his son. So there's a little tricky here, right? So ipse is referring to Daedalus, first of all, and we want to apply alas with suas here. He moves his own wings, and then we've got the possessive nati. He's looking at the wings of his son, making sure that he is flying okay. And another thing to point out, we got that two ets here, which we translate both and. So very nervous, like if you've ever looked behind you to make sure your friends are following, or if you're looking after a younger sibling, make sure they're still following you when you're going someplace. I know when I lead you guys to an assembly, right, I'm always looking back, but are they coming? It's very hard to decide where do I want to be behind you so I can keep an eye on you. Do I want to be in front so you know where to go, but then I'm looking back to make sure you're still there. It's very nerve-wracking. It only gets worse when you're actually a parent. Okay. All right, next bit. So we go to aliquis first. This is our subject, and we're going to delay on hos for a second because it's going to be the direct object of the verb vidit, right? Aliquis is going to be the subject of that verb, and in between all of that, we're going to get basically from tremula to orator. These are the poet imagining, this is Ovid imagining who this someone might be, right? So you can kind of consider this stuff from tremolo to orator. You can think of it being like separated by commas or parentheses, okay? So someone sees them, right? Somebody, right? While he catches fish with a tremula, how do we do it? With a trembling rod, or a shepherd. And then we want to apply inixos with pastor as well as orator. So leaning on his baculo, his staff, or, right, we're getting the or from the we here. It's just like que, but we, right? So, or an arator, a plowman, right? So somebody who's plowing fields, leaning on the stiwa, the handle. This is the handle of the plow, right? So somebody, one of these guys, a fisherman, a pastor, or a shepherd, right? Or a plowman, he saw them and was struck dumb by the sight, right? Was struck dumb by them. So we're understanding hos as the direct object of both of these verbs here. And then we've got the relative clause here, which is describing hos as well. Them, who could, which we're getting from posent, carpere, could seize the air, right? Push themselves through the air. And he thought that they were gods. Yes, I do. So a little indirect statement there, introduced by credidi, right? So that's our subordinate clause there. Can't give you away everything in the notes, right? So there's a lot to unpack here. And this is actually the subject of a lot of really beautiful paintings, which I'll show you guys in a minute. So we have really tying into our theme right here. And we know how this is going to end, right? We have a Greeks who are behaving as if they're gods, right? In fact, the rando Greeks are thinking that they are gods because they're moving through the air. This is beyond what humans are capable of doing. And we know this is not going to turn out well, right? We know that Icarus is going to die because of his excessive hubris here, and that Daedalus, for his excessive hubris, is going to lose his son, who he cares about and is one of his motivations for trying to do this in the first place, right? But he dared to do something that's beyond human abilities. Okay, let's continue, get the rest of it here, and see our pictures. So we have, again, the imagined, the three individuals here, right? You see the plowman leaning on his plow. We see the shepherd leaning on his hook, looking up. I think you can make them out just over there. And then the fisherman down there. And over here we see Icarus going down, as we know is going to happen soon. And Daedalus already gone. Another version of that. I think this painting kind of imagines a couple different stages. So you see them here in training almost, leaving from the island of Crete. So you see Daedalus and Icarus on the ground still, getting ready to fly. And then here you see them up in the air, Daedalus and Icarus going a bit too close to the sun. And here, of course, again, you see the plowmen, the shepherds, and the fishermen, and more plowmen, right? So they've kind of imagined multiple stages in this painting, which is quite beautiful. And here's a final image as I go over your assignment. So you're going to head on over to Google Classroom, complete the Google form for this assignment, Daedalus and Icarus, lines 210 to 220. Flies by, doesn't it? So that's it for today, and I'll talk to you all next time.